There was a festive atmosphere in the air in the kingdom of Makoko. Their former prince, now king, as his father had gone to meet his ancestors, Tunde, was to be married for a third time. His first wife was the beautiful commoner, Doyin, who he had a daughter with. Then his second wife was the exotic and exceptional beauty, Omorewa, who had vanished into the blue as mysteriously as she had emerged. And then there was the third, a yet-to-be-revealed bride. Rumors circulated in the palace and the village as to the identity of the new wife. Nobody knew, not even Queen Doyin. She was the long-suffering first wife who had been banished to the servants' quarters for a while and then been allowed back into the palace after the disappearance of the second wife, Omorewa. For a few years, a dark cloud had hung over her, but this had slowly been replaced by a numb apathy. Nowadays, she concentrated on her children, Yola and Badewa. Badewa was Omorewa's child, and even though Doyin did not care too much for the mother, she loved the little boy with all her heart. The day of the royal wedding was upon them. The villagers gathered in the central square, all eager to get a glimpse of their new queen. King Tunde appeared to muted cheers. He had been a popular prince, handsome, gregarious, and charming, but so far as a king, he left a lot to be desired. He was known as the bad luck king, as a lot had been going wrong in Makoko since he had assumed the throne. If nothing, he was still handsome, tall, broad, and regal. He was dressed in a splendid outfit and adorned with jewelry and beads. "At least he is smiling," someone in the crowd said. Ever since Princess Omorewa had left the palace, King Tunde had become a dark and brooding presence in the palace, who snapped angrily at all around him. Perhaps this new bride would temper his rough edges. There was a collective hush as the royal trumpet announced the presence of the bride. She was dressed in a beautiful blue dress and veil, decorated with gold embroidery in swirling patterns around its edges. All her jewelry was various shades of blue, lapis lazuli, beads, opals. She was extremely tall and elegant. She walked down the aisle, flanked by a throng of cheering villagers. She knelt when she reached the high table. There was a large chair, and the wedding officiant waited for quiet before he spoke. "This is a special day, as our dear King Tunde welcomes his beautiful bride, Aremu, to Makoko." The bride was unveiled, and there was a collective gasp, followed by excited chatter, as she was a most unique beauty. She had an afro that reached imperiously into the heavens, flawless chocolate skin, an incredibly attractive face, and most surprisingly, striking blue eyes that gleamed and sparkled as she gazed at her husband. Blue-eyed lost beauty, aka Aremu, was a most comely woman, and the king was well pleased. He smiled and beckoned for her to sit by his right-hand side. There was a large cheer as the queen sat by her husband, smiling coyly. "Quiet! Quiet!" the official ordered loudly. "There is more." The crowd quietened in astonishment. There were murmurs, and then oohs and ahs, as another figure came down the aisle. She was veiled and dressed in an elegant blood-red dress that hugged her slim figure. Again, the bride removed her veil and shook free long wavy hair. There were gasps of astonishment in the crowd, as her hair was so long it flirted with the ground. What was going on, people asked. Soon their questions were answered. The beautiful woman in red, with long wavy hair, was the second bride. Wavy-haired lost beauty sat to the left of King Tunde. "Quiet! There is more," the official said gleefully. By the time it was over, there were 5 brides, 3 to the right and 2 the left of a smiling and very pleased groom. There was the blue-eyed one, the wavy-haired one, the curvy one, the fair-skinned one, and the fine-faced one. It was a sight none of them would ever forget. The day their king had married 5 incredible and unique-looking beauties, all at once. Doyin watched quietly, mouth open. She had been in the dark herself and caught off guard. In the crowd, another woman watched in growing horror. Her heart hammered in her chest, and although the sun was shining brightly, she shivered as if she had a chill. She clung on to her husband Alade for support, fearful she would faint. Bola's worst nightmare had come through as King Tunde had brought the evil lost beauties into Makoko, and nothing would ever be the same. How could this have happened, you might be thinking? Well, let's go back a year or so ago, when Omorewa Bola had left Prince Tunde's palace in disgrace. For weeks, Prince Tunde raged and snapped at anybody in his vicinity. He had married a beautiful exotic woman, Omorewa, only for him to wake up one day to someone totally different in his bed. In a fit of rage, he had chased her away from the palace. Over the following weeks, King Tunde descended into what could only be described as temporary insanity. He would go around the palace, shouting at anyone that crossed his path. He recalled Princess Doyin from the palace quarters. At first, she was ecstatic, hopeful that they could pick up the pieces of their marriage, but she soon found that King Tunde was still hopelessly in love with Omorewa, or at least the version he married. He was brooding and short-tempered like a leopard with a bad toothache. On the rare occasion he acknowledged her, he would often mistakenly refer to her as Omorewa. He barely noticed Jola, and for some inexplicable reason, despised Badewa, Omorewa's son. "Get that simpleton away from me," he screamed at her one day. "I don't ever want to see him." Doyin trembled. Badewa was almost 2, but he never spoke and rarely smiled, except to Doyin. Whenever any other person tried to talk to him, he would run away and hide. Doyin's heart bled for him as she realized that he had been traumatized by the loss of his mother and the lack of love from his father. "He is your son and the crown prince," she hissed at Tunde. "That boy will never be my heir. Take him away immediately." The truth was that Prince Tunde missed Omorewa. He would wake up at night and look by his side, wishing the woman who laid by him was Omorewa, and not Doyin. After a while, Doyin had left his bedchamber for another room, unable to stand his mood swings. A little while later, Prince Tunde's father had moved on to be with his ancestors, and he was crowned King Tunde of Makoko. One of the first things he did as a king was to summon his advisors and give them a most bizarre task. They were to go out and find a woman exactly like Omorewa. She must have blue indigo eyes, flawless fair skin, hair that reached the small of her back, the face of an angel, and a curvy and voluptuous physique that would leave men weak in the knees. King Tunde's advisors were stunned. It was both an impossible and a pointless task. One of his advisors was his uncle, Aremu. He was a frail, bent old man who had served King Tunde's father, and now his son. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. He was a man that had a reputation of being able to fix any problems. But even for him, this seemed an uphill task. Aremu immediately sent spies far and wide to find such a woman. He presented several candidates to the king, and all were summarily dismissed. "What utter incompetence," King Tunde said one day, after yet another letdown. "She looks nothing like Omorewa." "My lord," Aremu said in a quavering voice, "Omorewa was a one-of-a-kind beauty. A similar woman simply does not walk the face of the earth." Aremu was quite right. There were hundreds of beautiful women in Makoko and the adjoining villages, but none like Omorewa. If she was fair, she wouldn't have curves. If she had curves, she wouldn't have a perfect, angelic, pretty face. And as for blue eyes, in all his years on earth, he had only met one woman who possessed them, and that was Omorewa herself. King Tunde's eyes bored into Aremu. "Perhaps this task is beyond you, uncle," he said through gritted teeth. "Perhaps you are too old, and I need to demote you, so you can work in the servants' quarters, where someone of your mediocre skills will be better suited." He leaned in and hissed, "I want a woman exactly like Omorewa. You have 14 days to get her for me. Otherwise, I will not remember you are my father's brother and toss you into the gutter." Aremu trembled. His nephew had always despised him, and he was tolerated only because of his intellect and resourcefulness. He would have to do something, and quickly. The next day, he embarked on a long journey. He arrived at a strange hut in a forest, a long way from Makoko. Soon he was sitting before a man so old, he made Aremu feel like a youth. The old man was wise and mystical, and possessed powers beyond human comprehension. Aremu explained what he was looking for. The man looked at him with rheumy eyes and nodded. He tossed some cowries in the sand and peered at the patterns carefully, muttering incantations underneath his breath. Finally, he looked up and spoke in a quavering voice. "The oracle says no such woman exists." Aremu's heart sank. There must be someone just like her. The woman you seek is perfect and does not exist. I am sorry. Anyone who seeks such perfection will live to regret it. Aremu broke out in a cold sweat. If he failed in his task, he was doomed. He begged the old man for a solution. Again, the wise elder threw cowries into the sand and read the patterns. There is no one woman that has blue eyes, fair skin, long wavy hair, a voluptuous body, and a perfect face, he insisted. However, he continued, there are 5 women that have each of these features. He smiled. I can see their faces in the patterns in the sand. Aremu sat up, hopefully. Tell me more, he said feverishly. Instead of looking for 5 things in one person, look for one thing in 5. The king will marry 5 women with the features he desires. Find the blue-eyed one, and you will find the rest. But be warned, sometimes when we seek perfection, we become like a dog that chases its tail. You might be best served to seek contentment instead. Aremu frowned. But where can I find a woman with blue eyes? The old man smiled wryly. That one exists. I have seen her. Find her, and you will find the rest. So Aremu sent his spies out to look for a blue-eyed woman. She was easy to find, as she was the only blue-eyed woman in the known world. Soon, Aremu was sitting before her, peering into indigo blue eyes that sparkled and gleamed with mischief. Yes, what do you want? Blue-eyed lost beauty, or Aro, as she had renamed herself, asked tersely. Aremu stared at her. She was an incredible beauty, but there was a meanness in those beautiful eyes that could not be hidden. He told her that he sought a queen for his king in Makoko. A smile played on blue-eyed lost beauty's face. Makoko. Something seemed to keep drawing her back, there she thought. There were worse things than being a queen, but being a half-living creature, as she was, wasn't easy. There were several things she had to do to stay in the land of the living, and it was proving more difficult than she had imagined. She sensed desperation in Aremu. She also sensed something else. Cunning? Ruthlessness? Evil, perhaps? Maybe she could play on that. So your king simply seeks a blue-eyed beauty as a queen? Aremu shook his head. Not just a blue-eyed beauty. He seeks 4 others. He went on to explain to her what he had been tasked with. As he spoke, an evil gleam sparkled in Aro's eyes. This was no coincidence. This was fate. Say no more. Come back here tomorrow, and I will have a solution for you. Aremu could not believe his eyes when he came back the next day. Waiting for him were the 5 lost beauties, all with one single feature that Omorewa had possessed. What a stroke of luck, he thought. Meet my sisters, Aro said, smiling. Aren't they beautiful? Yes, they are. Let us go now. We have no time to waste. The lost beauties all smiled. Just one thing. Old man, fine-faced, lost beauty said. Aremu glanced at her, then quickly at the others, and his intuition warned him there was something malevolent about these women. We agreed to come to your village, fine-faced, alias Beauty said. But there is something you need to know. Wavy-haired, alias Wiggy got up. Even though the air in the hut was still, her long hair swirled as she spoke. We are not as it seems. Fair-skinned, alias Yellow spoke. A corpse does not hide itself from the undertaker, she continued. Then they all got up and revealed themselves to Aremu. His eyes bulged, and he backed away in terror as the sisters transformed right before his very eyes. Their eyes started glowing, and the sweet, human feminine scent of perfume and scented oils was replaced by the smell of the half-living. Soot, rot, sulfur, and other vile odors assailed Aremu's nostrils. Then they spoke, and their voices seemed to echo from anywhere else but their mouths. Behind them, beneath them, from their left, from their right. Aro acted as their spokeswoman and explained what they were to Aremu. They were all extremely beautiful women that had all come to an untimely end when they were alive. They had struck a deal with a mortal named Bola, aka Omorewa. They would lend her body parts, and she would give them 5 years to be amongst the living. Like humans needed food and drink, they favored the souls of firstborn males for nourishment. This, however, was proving very difficult to procure without arousing suspicion, so perhaps Aremu could come in handy. You have all departed the earth before," he croaked, teeth chattering. They all laughed. "Do not be afraid," Wiggy said. "You want your back scratched, we want ours scratched." At least the mystery of Omorewa was solved now, Aremu thought. There had been rumors that she had become ill and lost her beauty, but that wasn't what happened at all. The lost beauties had simply reclaimed what was rightfully theirs. But a firstborn son, 3 times a year? It was an impossible task. He voiced his objection to the lost beauties. Yellow shrugged, her eyes glowing as brightly as her skin. "That is what we require to stay amongst the living. Can you do it or not? If not, then leave us alone. You are lucky we don't send you to your ancestors," she hissed. "It isn't something that I can agree to without deep contemplation," Aremu said. Aro shrugged. "Don't you think we know that, you old fool?" she said. Wiggy smiled. "Wherever we go, firstborn boys go missing. After a while, the humans put 1 and 1 together and make 2. It's not exactly like," she looked at her sisters and shrugged, "blend in. They turn on us and we have to flee. We have found ourselves wandering from village to village, without a home." Yellow spoke. "We are tired. We want to settle down somewhere. If you can arrange for us to refresh ourselves, without suspicion, we can make it worth your while." Aremu raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "We are powerful beings. We see things, we hear things, we feel things. We can be invaluable to you as you navigate court intrigues," Oju said. "Are you not ambitious, old man? After all, you have royal blood coursing through your clogged old veins. Won't you like to be young and vigorous again? Perhaps the crown might fit your head more snugly than Tundi's. As we reinvigorate ourselves, we can reinvigorate you. We can roll back the years so you become as you were 10 or 15, even 20 years ago," she continued. Wiggy went up to him and rubbed his shoulders. "Would you like to be my husband? Lay beside me and play with my hair all night?" There was no need for an answer. The look on his face betrayed him. Men will always be men, the sister queens thought, amused. "We promise not to be too greedy. What's 1 or 2 human boys going missing every year? Think of the possibilities. King Aremu of Makoko and his 5 beautiful sister wives." The truth is that from the moment Aro set eyes on Aremu, she sensed that he was a man that could match them for Machiavellian machinations. If Aremu was less evil than the sister queens, it wasn't by much more. Aremu was quiet. Could he really regain his youth? The prospect made him giddy. Could he become a king? Why not? He was of royal blood and smarter than that upstart Tunde. He started daydreaming. Perhaps indeed he could be king and marry all sister wives. But the question remained, how could he get away with it? It is a measure of how evil Aremu was that his issue wasn't the sacrifice of baby Makoko boys, but whether he could get away with it without suspicion, falling on the sister queens or himself. He put his evil mind into 4th gear, and after a while, a smile spread on his wizened old face. "I think we can do it. Let's swear an oath." So that is how the lost beauties, Aro, blue eyes, Oju, fine face, yellow, light skin, Beauty, curvy, and Wiggy, wavy hair, became queens in Makoko. Doyin smiled as she watched Badewa and Jola play with the strangely dressed veiled woman. She had been a godsend. Just a few days after the sister queen's wedding, she had been told that there was a candidate waiting to be interviewed for the nanny position. She was dressed in a black gown and veil that covered her body and face. Before Doyin could say a word, Badewa had run into the arms of the woman. Doyin was stunned as Badewa never ever warmed to anybody. She had interviewed several nannies in the past, and Badewa would start crying immediately when they tried to carry him. She had started to lose hope that she would ever find anybody Badewa would like, until now. How strange that it's this woman he likes, she pondered. Well, he seems to have taken a liking to you, Doyin said, a puzzled look on her face. But can I ask why you wear a veil and leave no part of your body uncovered? The strange woman explained that she was an adherent of a new religion from far away, and it was part of their tenets for the women to cover all their body in clothing. Very bizarre, Doyin thought, but truthfully she had no choice, as this was the only woman that Badewa would let anywhere near him. She was hired as a nanny to Prince Badewa. Your duties are to him. Make sure he is well taken care of, Doyin said. The nanny was shown to her quarters. She was both exhilarated and scared, as she was not unfamiliar with the palace and indeed Badewa. She undressed and removed the veil. Bola sat on her bed, her body shaking like a leaf. She was back in the lion's den, but this time, apart from Prince Tunde, she had the evil lost beauties to worry about. She muttered a silent prayer to the river goddess to protect her and give her wisdom, so she could get her son safely away from the palace. Doyin and Bola were in the garden, playing with Jola and Badewa. Come and sit by me, Tata, she told the strange nanny. It's okay, Ma, I am fine. Bola, alias Tata, for that was her moniker, said, alarmed. Nonsense. You have been on your feet all day. Come and sit by me and have some food. Reluctantly, Bola sat by Doyin. She had spent a few weeks at the palace, and it brought back memories she would rather leave in the past. Although she didn't see him, she knew King Tunde was never far away, and the evil presence of the lost beauties, or sister queens, as they were now called, filled her with a sense of foreboding. Just a few months ago, she had been plagued by nightmares. She would see the lost beauties in her dreams, hovering menacingly over Badewa. Then, like most other citizens of Makoko, she had witnessed the long-awaited wedding of King Tunde to his third bride. She nearly had a fit when one after another, the lost beauties were unveiled as the sister brides. She knew then that she had to make a move. When the news reached her that there was a vacancy for a nanny position in the palace, she had applied and had been fortuitously employed. The plan was to smuggle her son away from the palace, but this was proving an impossible mission. She was never alone with Badewa, and there were guards and courtiers everywhere. Seeing Doyin had also brought back a maelstrom of emotion, sadness, guilt, regret. Many times she had thought about confessing that she was Bola and begging for forgiveness, but each time she had chickened out. The only thing that gave her joy was being with her son Badewa. She spent as much time as she could with him while she waited for an opportune time to act. Tell me about yourself. You have a Makoko accent, but your religion is so different from anything I have ever seen, Doyin said, jolting Bola from her reverie. Bola felt shame flood her. Doyin was the kindest person in the world. Other women would have taken their angst out on Badewa, but Doyin had accepted him like her son. All of a sudden, she burst into tears. Doyin was alarmed. No need to cry, she said, and handed Bola a handkerchief. You have a child, don't you? She said, smiling. Bola looked up sharply. How did you guess? Doyin smiled and said she was good with Badewa, so she just assumed she had children of her own. Bola told her she had a son around Badewa's age. A little boy? Is he in Makoko? Bola glanced at Badewa, running around happily on the garden grounds. He is nearby, she said mysteriously. Doyin nodded thoughtfully. It was obvious she didn't want to talk about it, so she changed the subject. After a while, Aremu approached the women. The king would like you to join him and his sister queens for dinner tomorrow night, he announced. Doyin regarded Aremu. She had never liked him. Several times she had received complaints from women working in the palace about his creepy nature, and she herself had caught him drooling over her a few times. He was a vile old man who moved around in the shadows like a serpent. Doyin said that they would all be available for the dinner. Anything else? Doyin asked. Aremu's face contorted into what he thought was a charming smile. Soon, he thought, I have plans for you, my beautiful Doyin. Nothing else, he finally said. See you all tomorrow. The sister queens are especially eager to meet Prince Badewa. Doyin watched him leave, unaware that, besides her, Bola was trembling like a leaf in the wind. The next day, there was a huge feast in the banquet hall. King Tunde was on the high table, flanked by the sister wives and Doyin. There was much food and drink. Raucous laughter from the dinner guests filled the air. Bola looked on from across the room with Jola and Badewa. It was all she could do not to turn heel and flee. Can't people see how evil the sister queens were? She thought. Beauty, who had quickly become the favorite of King Tunde, leaned in and whispered something to him. King Tunde got up, swaying as he had had too much wine. My sister queens want to meet my daughter and the boy, he said. He could never bring himself to acknowledge Badewa. There was a hush in the hall. Doyin's eyes met Bola's, and she signaled for her to come forward with the children. It was a minor miracle that she was able to lead Jola and Badewa to the sister queens, without falling, as her legs shook with each step she took. They all regarded Badewa and Jola, smiling. Jola smiled shyly, but as usual Badewa hid behind Bola. Is he shy? Oju asked. King Tunde sneered. No, he is just slow, he said. Don't say that, my king, Beauty said. She got up and approached Bola and the children. Bola's skin crawled as if a poisonous serpent was gliding slowly over to her. Beauty bent and picked Badewa up. The little boy's eyes opened in horror as she brought him close to her face and inspected him. Her eyes were smiling and she said sweet words, but her thoughts were sinister. This rascal's spirit is strong. He should be our first victim, she said in her mind. Oju frowned. Put him down at once, she said to Beauty. This is not the time. Suddenly Beauty turned to Bola. She had been so enthralled by Badewa, she had not noticed her until now. She frowned as she regarded the veiled woman. You must be the help? Bola was grateful for the veil, as her face was a picture of pure terror. Beauty's eyes narrowed as she coolly regarded Bola. Then she sneered. Why are you wearing that veil? Let's see the face of the woman that takes care of our lovely Prince Badewa. All eyes turned to Bola, and suddenly there was a deafening silence. It was as if the crowd sensed that this was a standoff between two adversaries, and their curiosity was piqued. Who indeed was the strange woman that covered all her body? Are you deaf? Did you not hear the queen? King Tunde thundered. Remove that veil at once. Bola could not move. It was as if she had suddenly frozen. Doyin made to get up, but King Tunde shot her with such a venomous look. Quickly, she fell back on her seat. Bola looked around frightened. All eyes were on her. If she removed the veil, the sister queens and King Tunde were sure to recognize her, but she had no choice. This was her end, she thought bitterly, as slowly she reached for her veil with trembling hands. Just as she was about to unmask herself, Badewa gave a howl and scratched Beauty's face. She yelped in pain and thundered, "You little bastard!" There was a collective gasp from the court, all shocked at Beauty's outburst. She looked around, cursing herself inwardly for her slip-up. All eyes had turned from the veiled woman and were now firmly on Beauty. She laughed nervously, handing Badewa to Bola. "I mean, you little cheeky rascal," she said. She gave Bola a withering glare and returned to the high table with as much dignity as she could muster. Doyin had seen enough. She went to Bola and hurriedly led the children away. That night, the sister queens and Aremu had a macabre conference. They were all in separate places in the palace, but communicated by thought. They all berated Beauty for her outburst. Then the matter turned to the first sacrifice. The sister queens were eager to know when they would be allowed to slake their thirst. Very soon, Aremu promised. It had better be, the sister queen said. If not, he would be in trouble. That night, a most unwelcome visitor reacquainted himself with Makoko. Its name was One Who Cries for Its Mama, or Kefun Momi. Kefun Momi came down from the forests to the edge of Makoko and started crying, "Mama, Mama, I want my mama." The voice was neither that of a human nor beast. It boomed and echoed so none in the village could miss it. The whole of Makoko woke up in terror. Many years ago, when King Tunde was still a young prince, Kefun Momi had first reared its ugly head. Kefun Momi was a misshapen ogre that lived somewhere deep in the mountainous forest. It had introduced itself to Makoko with a haunting cry for its mommy. People had quavered in terror. Mothers clung tightly to their children, and even men shut and bolted their doors. That first night, nobody had dared come out. After a few months of tormenting the citizens of Makoko with its cries, Kefun Momi had disappeared. Now, after many years of absence, it seemed the monster was back. But why? The next morning, the blacksmith and his wife found their firstborn son missing. An alarm was raised, and a group of volunteers went looking for him, but he was nowhere to be found. What could have happened to the blacksmith's first son? Kefun Momi had never been known to kidnap children, but this was too much of a coincidence. 3 months later, Kefun Momi returned. It was a cool moonlit night, and the monster, as usual, called eerily for his mommy. The villagers shuddered and locked themselves indoors. That morning, another boy went missing. He was the firstborn son of poor traders. Within a year, a total of 3 other boys had gone missing, and Makoko was in crisis. King Tunde called an emergency meeting with his most trusted advisors. There was no doubt that Kefun Momi had gotten a taste for kidnapping, and he must be stopped. The next time he came, they would be ready to deal with him once and for all. Kefun Momi was 7 feet tall and extremely muscular. His arms were so long, it could touch his toes without bending. His head was big and misshapen, and so were his features. One eye was extremely large. The other was small. One ear was like an elephant's. The other was like a peanut. His mouth was a gaping maw, and his whole body was covered in coarse hair, except for its head and face, which was completely bare. It ambled down from its home in the forested mountains and climbed a tall tree on the edge of town. Then it started crying for his mommy. "Mama, Mama, Mama." The group of vigilantes from Makoko were ready for him. They moved stealthily towards the ogre and sighted him in the moonlight. Suddenly, Kefun Momi felt an arrow whiz past him. He roared, a noise that reverberated around the village, startling both humans and animals. "Again!" King Tunde roared. He had insisted on leading the vigilantes himself. The archers fired again, but missed their mark. Kefun Momi climbed down the tree with an agility that belied its great size and bolted into the dark of the forest. The vigilantes gave chase, but they were no match for the ogre. He moved through the forest with the speed and agility of a leopard and soon was out of sight. The vigilantes followed his tracks for a while, but gave up soon after. These were dark times in Makoko. Within a year, 5 firstborn sons had been taken by Kefun Momi. The villagers were terrified, and the streets were empty at 5 p.m. every day as a curfew was imposed. The vigilantes had gone looking for Kefun Momi several times, but without success. Bola held on to Badewa fearfully. He was a firstborn son, and she feared for him. They were in Doyin's room. He must not go out alone. Doyin said. Bola nodded. She did not have to be told. She glanced sharply at Doyin as she wiped a tear from her eye. What is it, my queen? Bola asked. Doyin smiled sadly. I miss my friend, she said. Bola's blood turned cold. Doyin turned to her with a weary look on her face. Growing up, I had a best friend. Her name was Bola. We were like sisters. We did everything together. She was the best person that I ever knew. But then, it all changed. I got married to the prince, and then I must have distanced myself from her. If only I tried harder with her. I blame myself for not staying in touch, getting caught up in my new life as a princess. To Bola's horror, she burst into tears. Bola clenched her fist and gritted her teeth. One day, Bola just disappeared. She went to see her great-grandmother in another village and never came back. Nobody knows what became of her. I miss her so much. She would have known what to do when that witch, Omorewa, showed up. Did I ever tell you the story? Doyin proceeded to tell Bola about Omorewa, how she had shown up in the village and caught Prince Tunde's eyes, how she and Yola had been sent to the servants' quarters. Bola felt sick to the pit of her stomach. Doyin had no clue that she was talking to Omorewa herself. Why did you take care of Badewa when this woman was so bad to you? She asked quietly. Doyin smiled. Believe me, I tried to hate him. When Omorewa left, he was abandoned to a kitchen servant. He was dirty and malnourished. One day I saw him, and my heart melted. We must never transfer the sins of the mother to the child. I made it a point to treat him as my son. He is a sweet boy, but for some reason, he will not smile or talk to anybody but me. She smiled and touched Bola's arm. And now you. I am so thankful you came in. This world is full of evil. That's why I miss Bola so much. She was the one person that never did me any harm. Her face suddenly turned serious. Why are you crying, Tata? Bola completely broke down. How could I have been so evil? She thought. Doyin was such a beautiful soul, and she did not deserve what she had done to her. She longed to rewind the hands of time. She never would have become Omorewa, never have hurt Doyin so badly. It was time to come clean, time to own up to her sins and warn Doyin about the sister queens. I have something to tell you, my queen, she said quietly, her head bowed. Doyin sat up, a puzzled look on her face. Tata was such a mystery. What is it? I am... A loud knock on the door interrupted her. Hold that thought. Doyin opened the door and frowned. It was Aremu. She invited him in. Aremu raised an eyebrow as he saw Bola. I came to check up on you and Badewa, he said, a smile on his face, as he eyed Doyin licking his lips. Doyin smiled. That's very nice of you, she said. What are we doing about Kefun Momi? It's been a whole year. I am doing everything in my power to find the ogre. I and the king have been leading the vigilantes myself. Doyin looked at Aremu from head to toe. Something was different about him. A year ago he was bent, frail with failing eyes and ears. Now he stood straight, looked stronger, and even his beards had more black than gray. You look good, she admitted. Aremu smiled pleased that Doyin had noticed the change in him. He cared nothing for Badewa. He had always lusted after Doyin, and she was in his plans. The sister queens were the best thing that had ever happened to him. Ever since they started feasting, they had taken care of him. He felt like 1,000,000 years. He had almost forgotten what it was like to wake up without feeling aches and pain all over. He excused himself and went to his room. Oju approached him remotely, minutes later. You like her, don't you? He froze. He had to be careful with these witches, had to watch his steps and thoughts as they were powerful beyond comprehension. Anyway, that concerns me not. The little rascal, Badewa, his spirit is strong and could nourish us all immensely. Not now, not him, Aremu hissed. We need to be mindful for a while. Too much too soon could arouse suspicion. Yellow laughed. You indeed are a man after my heart, she said. You are looking charming, dashing even, she said with a sneer. Firstborn boys agree with you. She laughed. Beauty joined them. We are pleased with you. Everyone thinks the happenings are because of Kefun Momi. Nobody suspects we are behind it. You are a genius. This was only the start, Aremu thought. He had big plans. That night, Aremu wandered into the forest. He climbed up the mountains. His spirits were high. This was a journey that had left him bruised, battered and winded in the past. But thanks to the sister wives, it was like a stroll in a backyard. Soon he was in Kefun Momi's cave and confronted the creature. It cowered away from him in fear, whimpering like a small child. Aremu smiled evilly as he looked at the ogre, Kefun Momi, his nephew and King Tunde's older brother. Thank the gods I didn't kill you as I was ordered, he thought. You, my imbecilic nephew, are the key to me becoming the king of Makoko. I bring food, Bruku, Aremu said. Bruku was Kefun Momi's given name, the name given to him by Queen Remi, the woman who gave birth to Kefun Momi, her firstborn, and Prince Tunde, her last. Kefun Momi whimpered. He was scared of his uncle Aremu. Apart from his mommy, Queen Remi, his uncle had been the only constant in his life. But while his mommy was kind, loving, and nurturing, Uncle Aremu was cruel and wicked, and always wanted something from him. Aremu handed Bruku a bowl of assorted nuts, fruits, and vegetables, and after a while, the ogre collected it. Imagine being so big and powerful, but eating only plants, like a cow, Aremu mused, watching Kefun Momi devour his dinner. When Bruku was done, Aremu addressed him. He brought out a whip, making Kefun Momi howl in fright. Now, Unku Amu will not beat you today, he said, mimicking the ogre's diction. Well, I won't if you listen carefully and do everything I ask. Kefun Momi started crying. It was a most bizarre sight. The powerful ogre, crying, scared stiff of the middle-aged man. You will go to Makoko tonight and climb the tree as usual. You will cry for your mommy. When Unku Amu and the bad men come, you will run away as fast as you can. Mama here, Kefun Momi whimpered. Your mother is worm food, Aremu thought with a smirk. Yes, he said, Mama is here. She is waiting for you. He left the cave and frowned. These witches do not rest, he thought. Who do you call a witch? Oju said laughing, if we are witches, what does that make you ain? Unku Kefun Momi. Aremu bit his lips. He could never get used to this. So we are to feast tonight? Aro said. She was pleased but puzzled. I thought you said no more than 5 a year. Or are you enjoying this even more than us? Wiggy added. With every sacrifice, Aremu was getting stronger than ever. His vigor was returning and his mind felt sharper. He hadn't been able to resist one more sacrifice before the end of the year. This is the last one for this year. Kefun Momi will cry, and you will do your thing, he said. Now get out of my head. You are tiresome. At that very minute, Bola was washing her clothes and singing a tune, completely unaware that Doyin had come up behind her. Doyin smiled as she recognized the tune. She stood behind her, enjoying Tata's lilting tones. It was a song popular among young maidens of Makoko. She and her best friend Bola had often sung it to themselves in halcyon days. Suddenly, her expression changed and she jerked forward. She was about to speak out when she noticed something that stopped her dead in her tracks. Tata had rolled up her sleeve to do the washing up and a small scar, birthmark, was visible. Tata, come here at once. Bola froze. She looked back and regarded Princess Doyin. I am so sorry, she said. I didn't see you there. Princess Doyin walked to her and grabbed her arm and peered at the birthmark. Bola gasped as she realized that she had slipped up. Doyin looked at her, mouth agape. Bola, is it you? Bola bowed her head. There was no use lying now. Slowly she removed her veil and faced Doyin tearfully. Yes, she said, I have a lot of explaining to do. While Doyin and Bola got reacquainted with each other, A small figure observed them in the shadows. Timmy was one of Doyin's servants. She was a slim, thin youth with an uncanny ability of moving around without being seen. She listened in on the conversation for a while, then slunk away. Soon she was in front of Aremu. Aremu listened to what Timmy had to say with a sinister smile on his face. Later in the evening, he arranged a remote meeting with the sister queens. They were all in different rooms in the palace, but communicated as easily as if they were together. He told the sister queens what his spy had seen. Aro frowned. It was incredible that, with all their powers, Bola had managed to hide in plain sight all this while. They would need to be careful with her, they mused. There might be more to her than meets the eye. Well, 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 Oju thought. Everything seems to be falling into place for us. The other queens agreed, laughing. It is time we take steps that move me closer to the throne, Aremu said. Now all our enemies are within arm's length. They will be easy to pick off, one by one. And that, my dear viewers, is the end of part 2. If you enjoyed it, kindly like and subscribe. I do apologize that it took so long to get this to you, but these long-form videos take 2 to 4 weeks to complete. Kindly leave a comment, as I would love to hear what you think about the story. A lot of people are unhappy with Bola. Is this still the case? If you want part 3, kindly let me know as things get spicier. The more people comment, the quicker I pause all open projects and get to it. Until next time, goodbye.